Thank you, Peggy, and thank you everyone for bearing with me for rescheduling this. My Spectrum internet didn't want to cooperate apparently on Wednesday, and I had a total outage and couldn't do it at the scheduled time. But thankfully, everything is going well this morning. And so now we can talk about the Code of Ethics training requirement. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation, which I'll send off to Peggy afterwards, and she can get the PowerPoint to you so you can use it as a reference afterwards. So I know we're scheduled for an hour. I don't really think I have an hour of material on this subject, but we'll see how long it takes, and there should be plenty of time for questions afterwards. And as Peggy said, I'm also happy to take questions during the presentation as well. So what we're talking about is NAR's requirement for Realtor members. And that requirement is that members must take a Code of Ethics training. Previously, it was a requirement that they take the training every 2 years. In 2020, I believe, NAR's board of directors approved a change to the Code of Ethics training requirement, and they extended that deadline so that now it's required every 3 years rather than every 2 years. And then they extended the current training cycle from ending on December 31st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. So that means the current 3-year training cycle will end at the conclusion of 2021. And good timing because, of course, then the pandemic hit and no one wanted to deal with the Code of Ethics training requirement in 2020. And thankfully, we didn't have to worry about it that year. But, you know, it comes around again, it's 2021. Now it's something that we have to start thinking about. So what is the training requirement? What it says, and what NAR's policy says, is that realtors are required to complete ethics training of not less than 2 hours and 30 minutes of instructional time. And the training must meet specific learning objectives and criteria established by NAR. And NAR publishes that training criteria on their website, although it's not really necessary for you to look at that training criteria specifically. The training has to be completed through NAR's online courses. That's one of the main ways, or through another method such as online or classroom courses via state or local associations. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you all of the NAR and C.A.R. courses that we have that fulfill this requirement. Also, there are courses offered by third-party providers that are designed for state CE credit that can also count towards the requirement. C.A.R. has a CE ethics course that counts, but the one from C.A.R. isn't necessarily the only one that counts. So if your members take an ethics CE course to renew their license, that will count. We have kind of a deal with NAR that any CE to renew your license that's an ethics course is going to fulfill that requirement. Now, NAR doesn't track those courses or approve of them. Like I said, C.A.R. has our CE course that we do approve. Individuals who are considering those courses should check with their local association of realtors to make sure that that course will count. And really what you should be doing is directing members to the C.A.R. education CE courses. That's going to be the easiest, and I'll explain why in a moment. But before we do that, I want to show you that members can actually check their status when it comes to fulfilling the Code of Ethics training requirement. So if you have a member call you up or call the association up saying, I don't know, I don't remember whether or not I fulfilled my requirement, this is what you can point them to. They should go to nar.realtor/myaccount. And then on the dashboard, right at the top here, under dashboard, you can see under my education, it will show the completion status. Now, this is my account. I'm not actually a realtor. So that's why it shows that I'm exempt. But for any realtors where it says exempt there, it's going to show either completed or not completed. And so if it shows not completed, the member knows that they have to meet that requirement and take some kind of training to fulfill it before the conclusion of 2021. So now the very important question, which courses fulfill the NAR Code of Ethics training requirement? So this is a list. It's also on a web page on C.A.R. Education's website, which lists all of the courses that are offered by both C.A.R. and NAR that fulfill this requirement. The ones at the top are the ones that are going to be taken by the most members, the first 5 that are listed here. So let's go through some of these. So there is a CE ethics course, the one that can be taken to fulfill your requirements to renew your real estate license. C.A.R. offers that as just a separate course, and it is a free course for members. So they don't have to pay any money at all to take this free CE ethics course. So they can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They can take the ethics course that's needed to renew their license, and they can fulfill the NAR Code of Ethics training requirement. And in addition, even better, if they do that and they complete the training, their record will be automatically updated, their membership record in NERDS or M1, whichever you want to call it. I think the system is now being called M1 rather than NERDS. Then we have the entire CE package that's offered by C.A.R. Education. Those are the 45 free hours. The ethics portion is included in that. And then we have the salesperson first-time renewal package, and then the package for all other license renewals. The ethics class in both of those packages will fulfill the NAR requirement. And again, once a member completes the ethics portion of that package, their membership record will be updated and it will show that they've completed the requirement. And again, it's entirely free. So lots of free options for completing this training. So I'd say those options are the ones that are going to be taken by most members who need to renew their license, but there may be some members who aren't renewing their license within the 3-year window of the current training requirement cycle. And for those members, there is a separate class that's offered by NAR online that is basically just the Code of Ethics training. It's on the NAR website. This PowerPoint presentation, by the way, includes links to all of these different training courses. So I'll be sending you, I'll be sending to Peggy, and she'll be forwarding this PowerPoint to you after the conclusion of today's training. But this 4th listing on the chart here, this is NAR's course. There's a non-CE version and a CE version. Now, even though we list the CE version, if someone in California actually needs the CE, they should take the free course that's offered by C.A.R. Education. So the only reason to use NAR's one is if you don't need the CE right now, and then you can get it for free on NAR's website. So the free non-CE version, that's what members should take if they're not renewing their license during the cycle. There are also a couple of other ethics courses offered by C.A.R. Education. I don't think very many people will be taking these to fulfill the requirement. There's Spotlight on Articles 1 through 3, and then Spotlight on Articles 10 through 12. The reason not that many people will be taking these to fulfill the requirement is a cost is charged, $75 per class. These classes are usually used more often when a member is being disciplined for a violation of the Code of Ethics, and the hearing panel says, we want you to take this Code of Ethics class to kind of bone up on this particular article because that's what you violated. So that's kind of the reason that these classes exist, but they also do fulfill the requirement. So if someone takes one of these classes, if they are disciplined, they can send you proof that they've completed these classes, and then you can manually enter fulfillment of the requirement on their membership record. So these are all of the classes from NAR and from C.A.R. All of these will fulfill the training requirement. So then we get to the next question, which is, what happens if a realtor doesn't meet the Code of Ethics training requirement on time? So this is where things get interesting. Failure to meet that requirement is considered to be a violation of a membership duty, and your bylaws say that it results in suspension of membership for the first 2 months of the subsequent year. So that means in January and February of 2022, if a member doesn't complete the training requirement, their membership will be suspended. Then on March 1st of that year, so March 1st, 2022 here, NAR's policy states that membership of a member who is still suspended as of that date will be automatically terminated. So that seems straightforward enough, but here's the problem. If a member gets terminated and then they have to take the Code of Ethics class to get reinstated, NAR doesn't allow them to do that if their membership status is terminated. It's kind of a flaw in the system, right? So we noticed this. We talked to NAR about this during the previous cycle, and we confirmed with them that due to the difficulty in terminated members being able to access the online code of ethics training, that local associations can keep members who haven't completed the code of ethics requirement in suspended status. So not terminated status, just continue to keep them in suspended status and don't terminate them on March 1st, even though technically their membership is terminated. It's fine because with suspended status, that member still doesn't get access to any services, but they are still permitted to take the NAR online course and complete the code of ethics training if they are in suspended status. Now, if the member still hasn't completed the code of ethics training by the end of 2022, at that point, the local association should change the member status to terminated. It should also be noted that in determining dues owed by local associations to NAR, the suspended status will continue to be included in the counts used to determine dues owed. So that is something to keep in mind. All right, so our next question is, what happens if a member who is suspended for failing to meet the code of ethics training requirement wants to rejoin the association in 2022? So the answer to that is a little complicated, so let's go through that right now. A member who is suspended can only rejoin after they have completed that code of ethics training. So when a member contacts you saying, you know, I was suspended or terminated for not completing it, and now I want to rejoin, they have to take the following steps. This is what you should tell them to do. First, say they can rejoin if they complete the NAR online code of ethics training, and you can send them the link for that. Then the member will actually need to inform you in that circumstance when the training has been completed. And when the member notifies you and sends proof that they've completed that training, then you have to actually check the member's record in M1 to confirm that they've completed the training. But here's the rub. If they've taken the training on or after March 1st of 2022, it's going to show that they've completed it in the next cycle, cycle 7. Now, the problem with that is they never completed the training for cycle 6, and that's what they're actually completing the training for in this circumstance. So what you have to do is actually go in and manually change it to cycle 6, because otherwise it will show that they've completed the next cycle and it won't require them to take it again for that subsequent cycle, which is not fair because then they're basically getting out of one of the required training sessions here. So you have to make sure that it's being input for the right training cycle, cycle 6, if they are to be reinstated. And then once you've confirmed that the member has completed the training, you can reactivate their membership. If the member already paid their 2022 dues, then it's a little simpler. The association can reinstate the member, you don't change the joined date, and you are allowed to charge the member an application fee if you choose to do so, but C.A.R. will not be charging a new member fee or any other fees to the member in that scenario. If a member hasn't yet paid the 2022 dues, we'll talk about how you handle that on the subsequent slide here.
Brian, we have a question from a couple of different AEs.
Sure.
If someone has emeritus status, are they exempt from this?
Let's put a pin in that because I have a slide talking about the various statuses and whether or not there's exemption.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure. I've got you covered. I know all the frequently asked questions here. All right. So let's keep talking about the issue of people who haven't completed it and then want to get reinstated. So here we have the situation, a member who was terminated in 2022 for failing to meet the code of ethics training requirement. And then they want to rejoin the association, not in 2022, but in 2023, the year after. So things are a little different in that case. So let's give our first scenario if the member actually did pay their 2022 dues. In that situation, the member must complete the new member code of ethics orientation to rejoin. But the joined date of the member is not changed. And of course, they owe the entire full year 2023 dues. You are also allowed to charge the member an application fee in that scenario, but C.A.R. would not charge a new member fee or any other application fee. On the other hand, if the member did not pay their 2022 dues, then the member is treated like a new member in every sense. They do have to complete the new member code of ethics orientation to rejoin. The association changes the joined date and the association collects the dues, which are prorated based on the member's new joined date. and you should charge the member the C.A.R. new member fee, and you can also charge your own application fee if you choose. And this is a good point for me to also remind you that any new members that joined the association 2019 through 2021, if they take the new member Code of Ethics orientation class, that class also meets the Code of Ethics training requirement. So they don't have to take a separate training on the Code of Ethics during this period if they are a new member 2019 through 2021.
And we have a question from GAIL. She's saying that she thinks the POE can only modify a Code of Ethics record on N1 if they originally entered it. So can she change a Code of Ethics record from cycle 7 to cycle 6 because NAR is the one who created that?
NAR informed us that it was possible to do that. I actually haven't used M1 that much. So if that's a problem, we'll have to look into that. I wasn't aware that that was an issue though. I thought that as long as it's your member, you can look at the record and actually modify it, even if it was generated from NAR's class. But if that is not true, I'm not sure how the record gets modified. NAR said that it should be doable. Yeah, please let me know if that does become an issue, and we'll contact NAR and figure out how to handle that. But now back to the presentation. What should the association do if a member hasn't paid their 2022 dues and also hasn't completed the Code of Ethics training requirement? So the non-payment of dues kind of takes precedence here, which means the association should inactivate the member as they normally would when a member hasn't timely paid their dues, and then put them in the inactive status unless and until their dues are actually finally paid. If the member later does come back and then pays their 2022 dues, then the local association needs to check the member's record in NERD/M1, whatever you want to call it, to determine if they have completed the Code of Ethics training requirement for cycle 6. If the member has completed that Code of Ethics training requirement, then the association can reinstate the member, doesn't change the join date. But if they haven't yet completed the Code of Ethics training requirement, the association will change the member status from inactive to suspended. And then if the member doesn't complete that requirement for Code of Ethics training by the end of 2022, then their membership should be terminated at the end of that year. So this is going to be very important. For any members who are inactive and then end up paying their dues after they are inactive, you are going to have to check in 2022 whether they've completed their cycle 6 Code of Ethics training requirement before you put them back into active status. It's going to be important because otherwise it's a loophole that could potentially allow members to wait to pay their dues, become inactive, then become reinactivated, and then they've never actually taken the Code of Ethics training. So it is something that you have to check before reactivating people. Next question, when a member is in suspended status, how does that impact their access to the MLS? So suspension of Realtor membership in most instances doesn't have any effect on MLS participation or user or subscriber privileges. Realtor membership and MLS membership are entirely separate things, and anything related to Code of Ethics training only impacts Realtor membership. So failure to complete that affects your association membership as a Realtor, doesn't affect your MLS access. So licensees affiliated with MLS participants have these separate subscriber user rights, irrespective of whether they hold Realtor membership. So in other words, their suspended Realtor status shouldn't affect their access to the MLS. That's basically the bottom line here. Our next question, what if a Realtor who is a sole proprietor, partner in a partnership, or a corporate officer is suspended for non-compliance with the Code of Ethics training requirement? This does create some issues because, of course, when a Realtor principal, a designated Realtor, is suspended, all of the members that are under that particular member are going to have issues. So let's talk about that. So the consequences of suspension of a Realtor who is a sole proprietor, partner, or corporate officer are established in the association's bylaws. But as a general rule, suspension for failing to meet the training requirement is treated the same as suspension for violating any other membership duty. So the model local bylaws provides that firms are given two options in order to avoid having other principals of the firm suspended when one principal has been suspended. Option number 1, the suspended member can sever his or her relationship with the firm, or the suspended member can remove him or herself from any form or degree of management control of the firm. So each local association will need to check its bylaws to determine if it's adopted that C.A.R. model locals bylaw language in its own bylaws. But if you have that language, that's how you treat it when a DR is suspended. If a firm's designated realtor is suspended, then the licensees under that DR must also be inactivated until the DR status is changed from suspended back to active. Or, and hopefully this is what happens in most circumstances, until the firm designates a different principal as the DR who is currently an active realtor. Hopefully you can get the firm to do that as quickly as possible so that all of these other members under the DR don't become inactivated for long periods of time. So you'll have to work with the firm to get them to find someone who is an active realtor and has fulfilled their code of ethics training requirement and isn't suspended. This next question is much simpler. What if the realtor who is suspended is not a principal, partner, or corporate officer? And in that case, suspension of that individual won't have an effect on the membership status of any other realtor members of the firm. So the complications really only arise when you have a DR who didn't complete the training requirement. That's when you have to deal with the things we talked about on the previous slide. But when it's someone who isn't a DR, it doesn't really affect anyone else except themselves. This next question is one we get sometimes. How will the code of ethics requirement impact the association's broker compliance tool compliance score? So let's talk a little bit about that. If the member did pay their 2022 dues and their status is suspended for not meeting the code of ethics requirement, they will appear on the BCT as an exempt non-member salesperson. In other words, your association's compliance score will not be negatively affected. Now, please note that the paid field will reflect not applicable until the association changes the member status from suspended back to active. Now, if the member has not paid their 2022 dues and hasn't completed the code of ethics requirement, the association is required to inactivate the member for non-payment of dues on or before February 28th. That is the dues delinquency deadline. And please note that that means if the member was previously in suspended status, then the local association will need to change it to inactive status after the February 28th date for non-payment. In turn, this will automatically reclassify the member as a non-member salesperson in the BCT, and consequently that will have a negative impact on your association's NMSP compliance score. Now, I am not really an expert on the broker compliance tool, so if you have further questions about this, Kiesman is probably the person to contact to get a little bit more information about how it affects the BCT, because I believe I got this information from him. All right, so now we get to a question you hear from a lot of members about the various kinds of exemptions and whether they exempt you from having to take the Code of Ethics training requirement. So first one, the DRE offers members a 70-30 continuing education exemption. In other words, if you reach the age of 70 years old and you've been a licensee for 30 years, you're exempt from the CE requirements. But just because you're exempt from CE, does that mean that you are exempt from NAR's Code of Ethics requirement? No. Members who are exempt under the 70-30 requirement from the DRE are still required to take the Code of Ethics training because the Code of Ethics requirement is an NAR requirement. Remember, this 70-30 thing is from the DRE, has no relation to NAR at all, which means that the DRE CE exemption has no effect on the members' need to complete the Code of Ethics training for NAR. Next question. Do members who receive honorary member for life status from C.A.R. have to complete the NAR Code of Ethics requirement? Again, the answer is yes. Since the member for life status is granted by the state association, it doesn't have any effect on this mandate, which is imposed by NAR. But then we get to the next status. Do members who receive Realtor emeritus status from C.A.R. have to complete the NAR Code of Ethics requirement? The answer to that is no. NAR has stated that members who have received Realtor Emeritus status are exempt from the Code of Ethics training requirement. And in the PowerPoint, I actually linked to NAR's statement saying that this is the case. So Realtor Emeritus status is the only exemption from training that actually exempts a member from having to take the Code of Ethics training requirement. So please make sure that you distinguish this from the DRE 7030 status, because it's entirely different. 7030 status is granted by the DRE, not by NAR. Realtor Emeritus status is something that NAR actually grants. So you have to make sure if someone is asking, you know, am I exempt from the Code of Ethics training, verify that they actually do have that Realtor Emeritus status. Our next question, do courses other than NAR and CAR courses satisfy the NAR Code of Ethics requirement? So first point here, and we get this a lot, I get questions about this, unless it's specifically stated during a C.A.R. training or webinar that that training or webinar actually fulfills the Code of Ethics requirement, members should assume that the training or webinar does not fulfill that requirement. I do various kinds of trainings that are related to professional standards, but not all of them contain the necessary content that would fulfill the requirement according to the NAR standards. So a lot of the trainings that I do aren't intended to fulfill that requirement, and they don't. So unless we specifically state somewhere that the training fulfills the requirement, the member should assume that they don't and that they have to take a separate training to fulfill that. Third-party courses that meet NAR's Code of Ethics training objectives can also fulfill the Code of Ethics training requirement. Now, of course, I highly recommend that you direct members to take the NAR and the C.A.R. courses, and it's really easy to encourage them to do that because those options are free. But the reason that you want to direct them to do that is because those courses will update their membership record automatically. So it's much easier. But if there are third-party providers that provide these courses, particularly like CE courses for license renewal, but any other courses on the Code of Ethics, each association has the discretion to accept that course as meeting the requirements. And you will have to manually update the member's record in M1 if they can provide you with a certificate of completion of the course. But the association could also say, you know what, we're not accepting these third-party courses, and we really only want you to take the NAR or CAR courses to meet that requirement. And that is totally fine. Each association can choose whether or not to accept any third-party courses as meeting the requirements. Last point here, what happens if an association doesn't ensure that its members comply with the requirements? So just want to make clear that NAR does require associations to comply with this as part of core standards. So an association that doesn't enforce both the new member and the Realtor ethic training requirement would be in violation of NAR's core standards criteria as well as the NAR bylaws. And the immediate result would be loss of NAR provided professional liability insurance coverage. You don't want to lose that. So don't get into this situation. And the association's charter as a member board of the National Association would also be at risk. In other words, all associations should be complying with this and taking the steps necessary to make sure that members are complying with the training requirement. I can tell you, there's a few things that you can do to make sure that your members are aware of it. Of course, you can send out emails and reminders, and those emails can include links to all of the various ways that members can fulfill their Code of Ethics training. You can provide a link to their account, that links where they can look at their account in NAR to see if they've already fulfilled the training requirement or not. Another thing that you can do is you can target any communications to members who haven't completed it. And the way that you can find that out is to generate a Code of Ethics report. Now, I provide the link here, and when I click on that link right now, it doesn't work. So you'll see my picture here. It looks like it's going to work, but the drop-down menu where you select association, nothing shows up when I tried to click on that. So I think right now this reporting function from NAR isn't working. I will try to follow up with NAR to see when this will be fixed, because being able to generate reports is going to be very important, and they really should fix it soon. So either it's a problem with my system or it's a problem for everyone and no one can generate reports right now. And if that's the case, NAR should be trying to fix it as quickly as possible. But when it does get fixed, this is going to be the link. You can select all active members without a code of ethics course in the cycle, which will be cycle 6. Then you can select your association, and then you can run a report, and it will show you all of your members that haven't completed it during the current cycle. And based on that, you can direct communications just to those members, and then you don't have to bother the ones that have already completed it. I think that's going to be really helpful. And that essentially is all that I have to share on the subject. There are a couple of additional links that I provide you in the PowerPoint presentation. NAR has an extensive FAQs document about the Code of Ethics training requirement. I recommend that you take a look at that. NAR also has information about membership suspension that goes a little further than what I talked about on this PowerPoint, but really most of that information that you'll need is on this PowerPoint. And then there's a little bit more information about how to generate code of ethics reports for the association. Hopefully, like I said, that reporting functionality will be fixed and you'll be able to generate those reports relatively soon.
Brian, I have a couple of questions and comments from the chat.
Sure.
Jenny would like to know if a new member has paid their dues but fails to complete the COE requirement, can the association move them into a non-member salesperson status instead of suspending them?
Non-member salesperson status has to be certified by the designated realtor. Or no, I'm thinking of LIFRO status, I'm sorry. So they'd be non-member salesperson status. Non-member salesperson status, that would just mean that they're not a member. So I don't think that's necessarily an alternative. Being a non-member salesperson just means that you're licensed under someone who is a realtor member and you're not a member yourself. So I don't actually think that's a separate status from being suspended. Okay, yeah, I'm trying to think this through. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of what the bylaws say if someone doesn't complete their code of ethics training requirement as a new member. I don't think it goes into suspended status. I think they just never become accepted as a member, unless associations are treating that differently. I might need to follow up on this. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of the answer there.
Thanks, Brian. Also, it's been noted that the emeritus status is not reflected in M1, so it still shows that the emeritus people need to take the training. And so GAIL's actually working with NAR to get that fixed.
Oh, good. Yeah, NAR system has flaws, and this is clearly one of them. Obviously, if NAR is saying that it being in emeritus status exempts you, NAR should have that reflected in the membership records. So I'm glad they're working on that.
Great. And then GAIL also noted that the NAR new member ethics course does fulfill the requirement, but it doesn't show up in as fulfilling this cycle. So she's working with NAR on that as well.
Great. Yeah, we worked with NAR during the last cycle and we were talking about how there were various flaws in their system in terms of implementation and enforcement. And that's another one. I mean, obviously, if someone is joining as a new member and they take the new member code of ethics orientation, that should show up as fulfilling their requirement for this cycle. So yes, hopefully NAR fixes that as soon as possible.
Thank you. And then George would like to know if the Code of Ethics report is the same as the Code of Ethics tool on the M1 Insights Hub.
I think the link that I showed you, I linked there from M1. So I believe that's what George is referring to, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Terrific, thank you. And then someone else is asking, we're also being questioned by members who cannot provide their certificates, who are asked of completion, I'm assuming, who are asking if the license renewal date registered with the Department of Real Estate is acceptable proof that they took the Code of Ethics, since they are required to take that 3 hours in California to renew. Can they just verify that they do not have acceptable proof?
They need to provide proof that they've actually completed the class. Showing the license renewal date on its own isn't enough because you don't know when they actually took the class. What matters is they have to have actually taken the training within 2019 through 2021. So the renewal date on its own is not sufficient.
Thank you. And Marcel would like to know, just to be clear, if they complete the code of ethics after the deadline, they still only get credit for 6 and not for 7. Is that correct?
That's correct. If they didn't complete the cycle 6 and then they completed after the deadline, they are only getting credit for cycle 6, and then they still will have to take it again in the next cycle, cycle 7, sometime between 2022 and 2024.
Great. And then Sandra said, if adding the Code of Ethics for new members course that NAR offers for new members manually in M1, should they duplicate it as cycle 6?
If adding it manually, I think if you take the new member orientation from NAR, that it will show up, but it's not showing up as cycle 6. Is that what I was hearing from GAIL? I don't think you want to duplicate the record. I just think you have to update the record to show that it's cycle 6. Or NAR may be doing that automatically. So we'll have to follow up with you on that.
And does anybody else have any questions? That's all we've got in the chat. Looks like we're good to go, Brian. Thank you for being so thorough, and everybody gets an extra 20 minutes back. So yay.
All right. That's great.
Of course, if you have questions in the future, you know Brian P. at CAR.org. He's, I think everybody's 1-800 call Brian. Oh, Sarita has a question. Sarita.
Hi, really quickly. So Brian, anybody that's taken the Code of Ethics this year, they should go into M1 as cycle 6, correct?
Yes. Yeah, everyone who's taken this year, it should show up as cycle 6. Again, if they've taken the NAR one, or if they've taken the CE course from C.A.R, it will automatically show up as being completed in cycle 6.
I have a quick question, if I can, as well. If they've taken cycle 6 already, and it's been it was the 2-year necessary time, now it's gone to the 3-year. What if they've taken the next CE course again? I'm sorry, not CE course, Code of Ethics, and they're thinking that that would be the cycle 7 qualification.
Well, they may think that, but it's not. And to qualify for cycle 7, it has to be taken within the 3-year period of 2022 through 2024. So if they're taking it to renew their license this year, then they'll have to take, for example, the free NAR course sometime in 2022 through 2024.
Okay, thank you.
And Brian, Melissa's got a member who said he didn't keep the hard copy of his certification for completing his CE. What should she do?
Does he have anything like an email showing like completion, or he needs some kind of verification?
She's saying no.
Well, then he'll have to take something else, like one of the free courses. He can take the free one from NAR.
I would imagine he could probably get in touch with whoever he took the course from and get proof of completion. Yeah,
that's a good idea too. Yeah, as long as he remembers the provider, that would be a good solution. Thanks, Peggy.
We're a good team, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, contact the vendor is what people are saying.
Yeah.
Rosemary's asking if it has to be a certificate. You had said it could be an email, right?
Yeah, just anything verifying that they've completed it. There's no formal thing that NAR says it has to be, but you need to make sure that you're not just going on their word. There needs to be some verification of completion.
Excellent. Well, thanks again to Brian, and thank all of you for being so nimble and being able to switch from Wednesday morning to Friday morning. I appreciate that we've had such great participation. Again, I will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody with both Brian's slides and then a bunch of links that were also mentioned. So you'll have tons of information that you and your staff can use. So thanks everybody for showing up, and have a wonderful weekend. And Brian, thank you again. That was really thorough.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for changing all of your schedules to accommodate my faulty internet connection. So have a great weekend, everyone.